Senhor Deus dos desgraçados, dizei-me vós, Senhor Deus, se é loucura, se é verdade, tanto horror perante os céus. Ó mar, por que não apagas, com a esponja de tuas vagas, de teu manto este borrão? Astros, noite, tempestades, rolai as imensidades, varrei os mares, tufão. Quem são esses desgraçados que não encontraram em vós, mas que o rir calmo da turba que excita a fúria do algoz? Quem são, se a estrela se cala, se a vaga pressa resvala, como um cúmplice fugaz perante a noite confusa? Dize-o tu, severa musa, musa libérrima, audaz. São os filhos do deserto, onde a terra expôs a luz, onde voa em campo aberto a tribo dos homens nus. São os guerreiros ousados que com tigres mosqueados combatem na solidão. Ontem simples, fortes, bravos, hoje míseros escravos, sem ar, sem luz, sem razão. Hello folks, it's me again, Amanda Enderman, your trusty tour guide in the wonders of the wonderful city, also known as Rio de Janeiro. On this video, folks, finally, it is time to talk about the abolition of slavery in Brazil. The introduction of this video was quite dramatic, with a very heated poem about the condition of slaves in slave ships by the abolitionist Castro Alves. But I am smiling on the thumbnail because unlike the video enslaving in Rio, this is a very happy theme because it's about the ending of slavery at last. But before I get right onto the theme of the video, I have to remind you that I'm currently offering walking tours through the city of Rio, and all of them are described on my website, which link will be in the description box below, as well as in the first fixed comment. So all you have to do is click there, text me via WhatsApp, that's very important, make your reservations, and let's get to know the city of Rio in person, folks! With me, Amanda Enderman, your trusty tour guide, of course. And now, without further ado, let's get right on to the theme of the video. Brits that might be watching this video, you can be proud because it was you who famously started the movement for the abolition of slavery all over the world. However, historic fact is that it wasn't just out of the kindness of their hearts, and nor did anyone in Great Britain get up one morning and say,
you know what, I want the slaves to be freed all over the world.
It was simply because in the 18th century, to be more specific, in 1760, the Industrial Revolution had begun. As such, it was much more profitable, of course, to have salaried workers who would have money to buy the industrialized goods rather than slaves. Slave labor isn't paid, so slaves don't have any money to pay for the industrialized goods. Moving to Brazil, because after all this video is about Brazil, the ideal of abolition gained strength in the second half of the 19th century. And at this point, something very interesting happened in Brazilian society. Even though the upper classes still owned slaves, and it was still considered very normal to own slaves and not frowned upon at all, it became frowned upon to work with slave trade. Go figure.
That doesn't make any sense!
I'll leave the video that I made about the passeio público in the cards for you, so that you'll see that rarely do the upper classes make any sense. The abolitionists were individuals of every single walk of life, both light-skinned as well as dark-skinned. So don't go thinking that, oh, it was just dark-skinned, the white-skinned people didn't care about freeing slaves. There were a lot of white men from the elites and even women, both dark-skinned and light-skinned, who were involved in the movement. To name but a few: Joaquim Nabuco, José do Patrocínio, Antônio and André Rebouças, Rui Barbosa, Aristides Lobo, Luiz Gama, Castro Alves, whose poem I read a part of in the introduction, and Ferreira de Menezes, which is accredited with bringing the abolitionist movement to Brazil to begin with. Normally, they would gather in organizations or societies or clubs where they would gather funds in order to buy the freedom of slaves. They would send petitions to the government demanding that there would be laws ending slavery, and they would also propose changes to projects of law that were already being discussed in the House of Representatives. Most of the dark-skinned abolitionists, though, would gather in a church called Nossa Senhora do Rosário e São Benedito dos Homens Pretos, which exists to this day in the downtown area of Rio, in the Rosário Street, and you can visit it, yes. And it was founded in 1640, but they decided to gather in this particular church. Inside of it, there are a lot of references to the abolition. And as a matter of fact, it is also part of one of my tours. Camellias, the flowers, were a symbol of the movement. This is why, of course, I have added them to the thumbnail. Couldn't possibly have an abolitionist thumbnail without camellias, because a Portuguese man named José de Seixas owned a property in Leblon, which, even though nowadays is a very hyped neighborhood where tourists love to visit and even locals, but back then it was an inhospitable territory, very far and very difficult to get there. People didn't go there very much. So because of this, he cultivated this flower in his property, as well as protected runaway slaves. All of this with the support of the abolitionists and of Princess Isabel. Princess Isabel was one of the main supporters of the abolition, and I will get to that later in this video. Remember the old slave market in the Valongo dock, which I spoke about in the video Enslaving in Rio? In 1831, it was officially closed as a slave market, but only officially. As I said before, Great Britain was pressuring all of the countries in the world to end slavery.
Okay, they were pressuring, but Amanda, Brazil was an independent country already at this point, you said to yourself. So, what power did Britain have over Brazil?
Remember 1808, when Britain helped the Portuguese court come to Brazil? Even as far as 1831, Brazil had a debt of sorts with England. So because of the pressure from Great Britain in 1831, the slave market was deactivated. And also, of course, because the imperial family supported the abolition, the two things together led to the closing. But this closing was only on paper. In practice, slavery was still a very lucrative business. So the slave traders started doing their business in the margins of the law, so illegally, in other beaches in Rio.
How did they never get caught?
We didn't have a structured and organized port in Rio until very later in the early 1900s with the urban rebuilding done by Pereira Passos, which I will get there in this series as well. Before that, any beach where you could anchor a ship, get the goods off, the slaves off, people off, wherever, you could. So they would obviously choose places which were less populated at this time, or not populated at all, such as Copacabana, Ipanema, Leblon even. No shortage of beaches in the city of Rio. All you have to do is eeny, meeny, miny, mo. This, in fact, is the origin of an expression in Portuguese which we use to this day for when something is done on paper, but in practice not so much, which translates to for the British to see. For the British to see, there was no slave trading going on. See, the slave market is closed, it's deactivated and all of that, but in practice it was a whole different story. With the efforts of the abolitionists, there were several laws which were passed, which ultimately led to the complete abolition of slavery. It was a gradual process. Firstly, in 1850 was the law Eusébio de Queiroz, which forbade slaves to be transported to Brazil in slave ships. No slave ship could be seen docking in Brazilian shores from this moment forward, even though slave trading could still be done with slaves which were born in Brazil. Speaking of being born into slavery, the next step was the Lei do Ventre Livre, translating the free womb law, as in a mother's womb, which freed from that year forward the children born from enslaved mothers, or I should say from slave mothers. And the reason why I insist so much in using the term slave and not enslaved is because there were those who were enslaved in Africa, captured, enslaved, and brought here, definitely, but there were also those who were born into slavery. People were born slaves until 1871, at least in Brazil, if not in other countries as well. And it's important to not forget the story of those who were born into slavery. After all, people who start to forget their historic facts are doomed to repeat them. Far be it from me to contribute to that. The next step was the Lei dos Sexagenários, translating the elderly law, or 60 years old law, in 1885, which freed all of the slaves which were 65 or older. Finally, in May 13th, 1888, the Áurea Law was signed by Princess Isabel right here in Rio, the daughter of Dom Pedro II, which extinguished slavery in Brazil for good. The imperial family, as I said before, was very supportive of the abolitionist movement, especially Dom Pedro II and his daughter Princess Isabel. And proof of that, which you can visit as well, is the Armazém Docas Dom Pedro II, which is located in front of the old Valongo dock, and which was built in 1871, the same year of the Free Womb Law, by the engineer André Rebouças, which, by the way, was the very first dark-skinned engineer in Brazil. Him and his brother, Antônio Rebouças. He had a very close friendship with the imperial family and with both Princess Isabel and her sister. And he only accepted the project with the condition that no slave labor was used in the building of this warehouse. And it was done. It was accepted by the imperial family. Also, as I mentioned in previous videos, Dom Pedro I, Princess Isabel's grandfather, already had the intention of starting Brazil as an independent nation without slavery. But the elites of the time were slave owners because they depended on agriculture. I believe coffee was the cycle in this time. He needed the support of these elites in order to keep the unity of Brazilian territory. So he had to make the hard decision of postponing the project of ending slavery. But Dom Pedro II spent his entire reign pressuring those same elites in order for slavery to be abolished. And finally it was done in 1888. Juicy gossip in this sense. In a ball in the imperial palace, André Rebouças asked a viscountess to dance, but she refused him because he was dark-skinned. And right then and there, Princess Isabel asked him to dance. Everyone might have been like, oh, seeing that. For those of you who are unaware, even though they aren't officially rulers in Brazil, the imperial family still has the status of Imperial House of Brazil. As a matter of fact, the city of Petrópolis pays taxes to the family to this day because of the Imperial Museum, which was originally their property, was bought by Dom Pedro I. They still have the titles of the head of the Imperial House in Brazil, which is currently Dom Bertrand de Orleans Bragança. I just found this out while I was writing the script for this video, that in October 13th, 2024, Dona Maria Gabriela de Orleans e Bragança the niece of Dom Bertrand, also in line, even though the line of succession is Dom Bertrand, then his brother Dom Antonio, then his son Dom Rafael, and then I believe Dona Maria Gabriela. But still, she is very active on social media and promoting the ideals of the monarchy, in case you want to check that out. And she was present at the celebration of the 384 years of the foundation of the Church of Nossa Senhora do Rosário e São Benedito dos Homens Pretos. Finally, I have to mention that, fortunately or unfortunately, abolition in Brazil led ultimately to the end of the empire and the proclamation of the republic. So much so that on May 13th, 1888, right after she signed the Áurea Law, the Baron of Cotegie famously told Princess Isabel,
"You have just redeemed this nation, but you have lost your throne."
to which she answered, "If I had 1,000 crowns, I would gladly give them up in order to redeem this nation." And this is why she is historically known as the Redeemer. But this theme of the end of slavery leading to the proclamation of the Republic is, of course, theme for future videos. So this concludes this video. I hope you liked the video, and if you did like the video, be sure to hit that like button, then right after that hit that subscribe button, then right after that, and most importantly, hit multiple times on that share button and share this video with as many people as you possibly can, so that each time more people may know about the wonders of the wonderful city. And as usual in this channel, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!